Welcome to Pharmacy View podcast, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key industry people within Australian pharmacy and associated industry. In this stream of podcast episodes, we discuss aspects of pharmacy career, resources and training, and how each area interacts with guests' current role or pharmacy-related business. I'm your host, Kavita Nadan, Pharmacist Founder from Locumate, and my guest today is proudly brought to you by Shopfront Solutions, for all of your shelf and digital marketing needs, part of the Arion Technologies Group. Hello to our incredible listeners. Hope you're all doing well. I'm actually counting the days until we get over this horrendous winter chill. It's really depressing, and I'm dreaming of days when we can have barbecues, warmer weather, and stay out late. But in the meantime, I have a super cool podcast for you today. I've got Vinit Kewal, pharmacist, director at the Infinity Group, and volunteer with PSS, is joining me for an exciting session talking all things Vin and pharmacy and the future. Thank you. Welcome, Vin.
Thank you, Chavi. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Lovely to join.
You're welcome. Now, I don't know if you've heard my previous podcast, but I like to start things off with a little icebreaker question. And it's just to get an insight into your mind and maybe what you're thinking. But today's icebreaker question is, if you could be great at any Olympic sport, which one would it be?
Olympic sport. I think I would have to say the 100-meter sprint.
Oh, yeah.
It's a glamour event, right? It's the one event everyone tunes into the Olympics for. So maybe it's a bit shallow of me, but yeah, that's the one I would go for.
Yeah, I mean, fastest man in the world, potentially. Like, that would be amazing, right?
It's got a good ring to it. It does.
Love it. That's awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. Vin, I've known you through our interactions and partnerships through Locumate, but for everybody else out there, who is Vin? And let's start from your early days up until now.
Sure. So I'm obviously a pharmacist within the Infinity Group. But before then, I grew up in Fiji. So it's a small tropical island, about 3 hours from Australia. I think everyone knows where Fiji is. It's a great holiday destination. So I grew up there, did all my high school up there, and then I moved to University of Queensland to pursue my pharmacy degree, essentially, and stayed on ever since then. Always had a strong interest in community pharmacy, so especially in regional Australia. So most of my practice has been in regional parts of Australia, largely Queensland, but other states as well. And a pharmacy owner in regional New South Wales for about since 2004, I think it was. A long time, put it that way. It's been a great experience, and along the way, met my wife, settled down, have 2 wonderful kids. They're teenagers now. I keep reminding myself that they're wonderful, but they are.
They're in the teenage phase.
They're in their
teenage
phase.
Yes.
And it's great having, as everyone knows, having a family keeps you grounded, and they're your greatest supporters. Like, regardless of who you are, they're the ones who will always be in your corner, and a great source of inspiration and strength for me all the way through. So, and along the way, the journey started from 1 store, 2 stores, and so it's carried on from there. But I think the evolution of the pharmacy practice, but also the evolution of myself as going from a pharmacist in a single store to a pharmacy owner to now being part of an organization with thousands of people on the payroll. I think the question about leadership has and how we grow into it, but also the sort of formal training that pharmacists have in that space. And that's always been a big thing for me. I think my saying is you manage things like cash flow, inventory, finance, all of that, but you don't really manage people, you lead them. So that's been, I think the last few years, that's been an area of particular interest for me.
Brilliant. So I know you mentioned you love that whole community pharmacy, and I'm assuming it's because of that aspect of people and, the interactions and the relationships you build. was pharmacy always your first choice to be able to do that? Or did you have other career aspirations, or this was the perfect mix of both?
Oh, no, I'll be honest, Kavi, I picked pharmacy because it was the shortest of the degree courses on offer.
I love your honesty.
It was 3 years back then, and I thought, great, 3 years and I'm out. But I always wanted to be, I wanted to do something in aviation when I was growing up. And I still have a strong interest in aviation, but never quite panned out for whatever reason. I remember trying out for the Air Force. So a few things, but never quite really worked out the way I might hoped. But not to say the community pharmacy part hasn't been good to me either. And as I got into the pharmacy practice side of it, the community pharmacy practice, I actually realized it really did align with some of my long-term aspirations. So it's been a good journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to start from where you did, and sorry, I just have to say shout out to Fiji. Yes, paradise. You missed that bit. So I think starting from where you did and to coming into a brand new country and, starting your university life from there and then where you've come up to, like, that's a great example of not only pursuing and going ahead with what you are wanting to achieve, but also the leadership element that you mentioned throughout it all was very, very important, because you're not only leading everybody else, you're leading yourself as well to be able to pursue this certain level that you have come to. So that's amazing career story. With people who tend to follow these paths of great, careers and travel along and reach great heights, they do experience a lot of hurdles and challenges. Any that come to mind, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, Kavi, hurdles and challenges. How much time do we have?
Your top three.
Well, look, I think there's internal and external hurdles. And internally, it was, you have, when you're branching out to something, in the early days, it was pharmacy ownership. There's an internal hurdle. Am I good enough? Is this the right time? Will I be successful? And combined with the external hurdles, around things like being able to enter into something like that, finance, being able to actually get the opportunity in the first place. So I think if you think about hurdles, the internal ones are actually the hardest ones, because once you've reached those barriers, you kind of realize that really anything can be possible. And I know it's a cliche, right? Put your mind to it and you can do it. But I really think, and it's a particular interest of mine in this instance is, the entry of women into leadership positions within pharmacy. And I think some of those hurdles, I'm not saying they're all internal. However, some of those hurdles for women are much harder than what I faced. Externally, the hurdles are, we all know what they are, like in terms of access and getting those opportunities and the cost of entry, all those sort of things. But all of those are, can be managed and overcome. It's, for me, the hardest parts were actually, building up the courage to believe in myself enough to take the leap. And it took a little while to kind of, tell myself, well, it's okay, I'm going to take this leap of faith, and whatever happens, it'll be all right. So it took about 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
But externally, though, we're in an industry that's in constant change. And if I think back to my early years when I graduated university, and the naysayers were out, community pharmacy is doomed, Medicare is doomed. And it was, the message back then was very similar to the messages you hear these days as well. So I think that community pharmacy is such a resilient industry that despite all of that, it continues to grow and thrive. Always amazes me.
Yeah, I think that's a very timely message for what we're facing right now. And I feel like we've been in this position before as community pharmacists and especially owners. And it's good to get a reminder that we've battled this and come out of it, if not stronger. Which brings me to, you mentioned something about, when you first went into ownership and having that that kind of self-doubt and whether, you were good enough. It's almost like, just that imposter syndrome that we always face, that,
Absolutely.
am I meant to be here? And I feel like and what sort of messaging would you have for, the young, upcoming new generation of pharmacists who feel like, ownership is really out of their reach and they feel that it's not something that is possible for them? What would you say to that, Vin?
I would kind of say is, as difficult as it may seem, the ownership aspirations, they're actually, as part of, and I can only speak for the group that I'm part of, which is the Infinity Group, and definitely we encourage partnership and ownership, and not just, I don't think of it as a way to tie people and lock people into things, but as a way of, it's a natural part of your career progression, just like it's been for me. And I think what I do want to encourage for younger pharmacists who are thinking about it is that it's definitely possible. It's on the cards. Is it as easy as it used to be years ago? Definitely not. The ownership landscape has changed. I admit that, and the barriers about cost to entry, they're high. Acknowledge that as well. But also, I also think that the number of opportunities for young pharmacists who want to make it happen as far as ownership goes, never been more possible, I believe, than at this point in time in the industry.
Yeah.
And we, at the moment, we, actively encouraging more managing partners to come through our group of stores. So we've got about 25 or so at the moment. And our aspiration is to get to beyond 70, 80. So I'm not just saying the words, I'm actually walking the walk at the same time.
Yeah, brilliant. And so I guess that brings me to the Infinity Group. Mm-hmm. When was it started? Who's involved? And what is it that, if you were to tell somebody what is the Infinity Group, mm-hmm. what do they stand for? What's their vision? What are some of their values?
Yeah,
what would you tell me?
So it's been a 15-year journey for the Infinity Group. Store number 1 was in Spring Hill in Queensland, still there. And I think if you look over the period of time, it's been a journey of growth in number of stores, in turnover, but also growth in terms of the people who, are part of that group. So Amit Jaraj, or AJ, as we all call him, started, he's the one who started the whole group back with store number 1. And I think the ethos and our values are derived from a lot of, what he started off with in that point in time. And that is about making people the center of the organization. I'll always understand, and we always believe this to this point is, we don't know everything. And, there's someone who will come along and teach us something we haven't known before. And we're open to that idea. So we're not perpetuating, in a sense, a model that, we think, oh, this is what it is, and we're going to carry on with that. It's, I think the Infinity Group is very adaptable and agile. Again, 2 very overused words. But because of and we are that way because of the way we've grown, the pace of our growth. It's sort of, how can I describe it as an analogy? It's like finding the perfect fit in a set of clothes. And the next week it doesn't fit you anymore because, so it's do you try and alter this suit to make you fit, or do you find something else? And that's been probably one of our greatest strengths, but also at the same time our greatest challenge. In that, and speaking from a director point of view personally, it's always, I always felt like it's been pushing me to grow. You're always trying to catch up to something. And I think that's a good thing. Not everyone's cup of tea, certainly is mine though. But along the way, we've kind of evolved greatly. So the 8 director cohort who are in there kind of thing, we've all played different roles within the organization. But it's, at the very base of it, it's a fun place to work. So it's not all light-hearted banter, I admit, but generally everyone gets along. And one of my business partners and I, Nalene, we started in Wollongbar about 20 odd years ago, and we've been business partners and friends all the way through, and we're still friends. So I don't know how many business partners can say that.
That's great. I agree with that.
But the number of stores, as we continue to grow, our aspiration is to be, one of the leading private pharmacy groups in Australia. And we also acknowledge that, we can't do these things all internally by ourselves. And we're having some great people join our organization just intrinsically as we grow, who have allowed us to think differently and, change the way we pursue the model. So it's constantly evolving is the best way I can say it. But the great thing is we've been able to take everyone along on that journey with us. And this has been a smooth ride all the way through, Kavi. No, it hasn't. This journey sort of like this with this pace of growth ever has been smooth. But it's been fun. I can say that much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to have, something you're passionate about, but also enjoy doing.
Love that.
If you get those two, if you get that mix right, it's very powerful.
I absolutely agree. I think the culture that you're talking about, this culture of fun, of adaptability, of, seeking the expertise when you know it, that it's not evident within your group, just going outside and getting that and having the humility to know that, we need to get some better opinions or better advice, and that is what will help your growth. I think that's brilliant, because a lot of people won't admit that. They feel like they know everything, right? But knowing that you have to seek for outside help is important.
No, absolutely. And, I've been in that trap where you kind of think, well, I'm a multi-store, I know this many, surely I know everything about the industry by now. And then something comes along that kind of, reminds you. I think the community pharmacy industry has a way of teaching people humility as you go along.
Yes.
And, change, there's one thing that's constant is change, right, in our industry. 60-day dispensing is, raising its head at the moment. It's a big thing for our industry. And I've been talking to a lot of younger pharmacists and some of our partner candidates and current managing partners about my own experience about change within the industry. Go back to the original PBS reforms days.
Yes.
And, and this, for me, I'm not saying this is not not a significant event, but it's, all I think of is we've been here before. And as an industry, from a personal point of view, this is a story I often tell people is I joined, when I did pharmacy, it was great because, it was all, the clinical side was very separate. And then pharmacists had to vaccinate. And I was like, I didn't sign up for this. But did the training. I think my first vaccination, I can't remember the name. Even if I did, I wouldn't say it for privacy reasons, of course.
Yeah.
But it took me like 30 minutes to administer that vaccine because I was like, I got the right area. It's sort of like that internal blockade again, but got through it. And now, if you think back to what pharmacy was like when I first started, think about, what was over the counter, 0.5% hydrocortisone, no consult rooms, it was all dispensing, certainly not prescribing. To look at the industry now, we're doing all these, the scope of practice increased so much. Never been such an exciting time to be a pharmacist, I reckon.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
And that industry, the community pharmacy industry, continue to evolve in that manner, and we've got some great peak bodies, PSA and the Guild, who are driving the industry that way. And it's up to us to step into that breach, and take it up and acknowledge challenges, like workforce, workflow. All these are important challenges, and we've been through this cycle of constant change just from COVID. What a disruptor that was, not just to an industry, but to the whole world. And just as we get through that, we're settling down on the supply chain issues, bam, here's another change. Here's 60 days for it. Here's changes to the way we do opioid, replacement therapy. Let's just throw that in that mix there. As if
Why not?
As if things were hard enough as it is. So yeah, it's been speaking to pharmacists with an over-PS, we hear it's been very draining time. It's been challenging from not just from a workload point of view, but also, from a workforce point of view, we constantly being asked to do more things. And what sort of things do we need to give away in order for pharmacists to be able to take that next step into the expanded scope of practice, as we like to call it. Very nebulous term, right? So I think if you look at other models, dispensary technicians can probably take on some of those administrative tasks. AI is on the horizon.
Yep.
I read somewhere that someone created an AI bot that sat the intern exam.
Yes.
And it scored something like 70% or something like that. A very good score. I don't know what the exact number is. Probably certainly higher than what I would score if I sat it. But kind of gives us an idea of where the industry might head to in the future, and how pharmacists might be seen and what pharmacy practice might look like. So
Absolutely.
Are we in the business of the supply side of things, or just purely information, or what is healthcare? What is healthcare in this modern world? Is it provision of services? It certainly is, but what does that mean? Provision of information by in the context of the person who's standing in front of you. I don't think automation will ever take that leap. By which I mean, if someone comes in and says, "Hey, I've got a rash on my hand. What do you think it is?" It would be very hard for any sort of AI bot to ever be able to do that. And I think that gives us an idea of where the profession needs to head to in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I did a podcast recently with a pharmacist in America, and he says, I don't like to call ourselves medicine specialists. I like to call ourselves treatment specialists. And I'm like, that is so true, because we don't just supply medicines, do we? We do the whole shebang. If you get somebody in with a wound, you think about how can I best treat this patient. It doesn't necessarily have to be medication. I don't know how many times I think I send people out because they've got a cough, and I'm like, nothing's going to help you right now. You really need to keep an eye on it, do your, lifestyle things like steam and all that, and then see the doctor. Like, it's no point. So I think that's where that shift is now, because it's that holistic approach to pharmacy that we really need to look into, which is what this scope of practice is about, I guess. Now, you mentioned we've gone through this whole the pandemic. That was one thing. We've come out of there burnt out, feeling, in a lot of cases, pharmacists feeling disillusioned, deflated, feeling like, is this what I'm going to be doing? And the 60-day dispensing hits us, and you can understand that, again, it's taken a hit on their mental load. Do you have some advice, or what sort of support do you think these pharmacists need? I know they know about this whole scope of practice, exciting time and everything, but how can we reach and talk to these and communicate to these pharmacists who might be feeling like, what's the point of it all?
It's a really good question, Kavi. Something I've given a lot of thought to. It's sometimes it's for pharmacists who are entering the profession, it's kind of reminding them of where it was at a point in time, and as challenging as it may be at this point in time, 20 years ago when someone like me started, it really were just sticking labels and boxes, so don't attack me, all you 40, 50-year-old pharmacists, but it's true. We were, that really was the essence of the job. I don't know, I challenge pharmacists who are just graduating now, the internship year, how appealing of a career that might have been. Probably not very much. At the same time, though, the challenges around mental health and workload and work-life balance and burnout, they're real. And as a volunteer for the PSS, I see it, I see it all across the industry, from the calls we get and things like those, but also within our network, we see it as well. There's some great resources, I think, available. PSS is one of them, obviously. The other ones, Black Dog Institute has some fantastic resources.
Yes, yeah.
Their TN network designed for healthcare professionals. And I think, as an industry, we do talk about this, burnout and things happening a fair bit. And it's, what can we do as an industry to challenge it? I don't know industry wide what we can do, but within the Infinity Group, certainly we are looking at those sort of things. What sort of resources can we provide our pharmacists to be able to, and they can't all be internal, so
exactly.
Is it as simple as creating an EAP and ticking that box? I don't think it is. I think it's something more than that. Do we have the answer as an industry? We certainly don't. Pharmacists always being, those people you kind of, no matter how sick you are, you still turn up to work. It's like a badge of honor. How much sick leave and annual leave you've accumulated over the time. And as an industry, we probably need to encourage that to change. But it's deep rooted. It's not easily changed. So, open to suggestions from your readers as to how we can do it in a sustainable way. Sorry, listeners, I should say, not readers.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it has to be a communal effort, doesn't it? Everyone kind of contribute and talk about it. That's the most important thing. I think for very long we've just pushed it under the rug and just turned up to work, because you can't be seen as, especially as a leader, especially as leading your staff, to be seen to not have it all together. And I feel like it just needs to be made aware that, especially the leaders are the ones who are taking on all these burdens, and especially for their staff as well. So that's a very interesting question. And I always wonder, like, it's probably we're at the start of it, but something that we really need to think about. And I think your volunteer with the PSS would probably highlight a lot of the struggles that we're facing right now in the industry.
It's a fantastic service, the PSS. But more broadly, I think just speaking openly about mental health is probably a good place to start.
I agree.
We're healthcare professionals, so that's great. But what sort of things can we do? For me personally, it's being outdoors. Going hiking, things like those. So that's something that I do. I'm sure everyone's got their own little mechanism. So but being able to kind of destigmatize it a bit and kind of say, we're very good at talking about physical illness or physical challenges. Broken arm or something, or fell over and sprained an ankle. Very easy to talk about, but very hard to talk about things like, oh, I was feeling anxious, or I'm feeling a bit down at the moment. It's they're not easy things to talk about.
No, absolutely. And I think a bit of cultural and traditional factors come into that, especially I'm sure you could relate, been growing up in a
100%.
Household that never talked about that stuff, but I think we need to make it the norm. So it's a culture shift, it's a mindset shift as well, but something I think we really need to. And I think the younger generation are a lot better at doing this than we are, but it's something that we could also almost learn from them as well, I guess.
I know, I think the work-life balance part gets thrown out, quite a bit, but I think there is something in it in that sense.
Yes.
On one hand, you have industries that are moving to a 4-day work week, which is great in a sense. Not really. I think I don't know whether it's workable within our industry, but it's I think the momentum is towards that way. The working from home, for instance, it's been that's companies are now trying to unwind that and get people to come back with varying degrees of success. Doesn't apply really to us as pharmacists because we never really had the option to work from home. So we've kind of stood on the sidelines and watched as other people have talked about it. But as an industry, it's being that I think the very accessible healthcare professional is what's so appealing about pharmacy. And then pharmacists coming into the industry at this point in time, the younger pharmacists, and some of those social media posts and videos kind of thing probably didn't, if I were a young graduate looking at those, I'd be thinking, geez, is it time for me to change my major? And there's been lots of discussions about, how what pharmacists are paid as healthcare professionals. Very valid, and I think, and we've, at least in our group kind of thing, we've made a conscious decision to pay pharmacists what we think as a minimum they should be worth, regardless of your experience or whatever it is. We've kind of created a minimum amount that we would pay any pharmacist with our organisation, which I think is important.
Absolutely.
I think we kind of get driven by the maximum amounts, but I think start off in saying as a minimum, if you're a pharmacist and you work for an Infinity Group, you're not going to get paid less than this. And I think it's a very powerful thing. It's expensive, as a group to make that, but we're all pharmacists and we all value the profession. We all, at the end of the day. So it was an important step change, and I think that's evolving as well as we go along.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Good.
So it's important to talk about it, but it's important to actually do something about it at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've talked about where pharmacy is at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to tell me, in, say, 10 years' time, you walk into a pharmacy, what do you expect it will look like?
Oh, I love these kind of questions, Gabby. What does the future look like? I imagine, there'll be a lot more automation. I sort of imagine, people coming in and the initial interaction, that kind of thing. Is it with a person? Is it with a screen? Is there would there be a bot in there, something,
Yeah.
To do that initial triage, so automation in all sorts of forms, I think will be a big part of that industry, taking away the supply function of it, and prescriptions are moving that way anyway, they're all electronic. But also, is it a physical location or is it a virtual location? And it's a bit of both, depending on how people want to interact. And where do pharmacists fit in this space then? Is there options for pharmacists to work in the telemedicine space? I totally think there is. Can Schedule 3 medicines, be supplied by telemedicine in the future? I don't see why not. But what does a physical pharmacy look like? I think it will be an evolution rather than a revolution. At the very foundation of it, we are a conservative industry.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
But it's also driven by what the public expects. Too much change is probably, so it's going to be an evolution. So if you look at some of the leading pharmacy groups or the leading pharmacy banners and chains kind of thing, it'd be an evolution of that concept. And like you said, more of a holistic, a place where people can come in and get the full scope of what they can expect to get from a pharmacist at this point in time, but also in the future, not just vaccinations, but primary healthcare.
Yeah.
So what does it look like physically? I'm imagining it, but I have a vivid imagination, so probably.
Are we on our hoverboards?
Oh God, it's just, it's screens everywhere. VR glasses, putting them on.
Yeah.
So it's I think it'll be an exciting space, but still be a physical location.
Well,
in some respects, but it'll also play, I think, a large part in that virtual environment as well, on how people want to interact. And how we can actually multiply, in a sense, the access to healthcare professionals. Such a challenge in our regional and rural locations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I find this funny that, within our industry, we have this model of community pharmacy, that has to apply in the middle of Metro Sydney and Melbourne, versus whether you're out in somewhere in region remote. But, the concept what a pharmacy should be is similar, yet the challenge of location and logistics is so different. And I'm thinking, well, why shouldn't there be a different model depending on where you are? So
that's a good point.
Those rules that kind of bind things like supply and, what pharmacist, advice, it can, I think it needs to evolve. It needs to evolve so that the equity of access for people who live in regional and remote areas is very important, and I think for those of us who live in metro areas, I don't think we actually realize it until you head out somewhere regional. And there's no Uber Eats and there's no Uber for that matter, or taxis, and your supply chain you're at the end of a very long supply chain that is easily disrupted. So some of those challenges, I think, and I think the laws and regulations probably need to reflect that. Well, I don't think they do that very well at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of changes that need to happen to kind of create a little bit more accessibility, but also to move with the times as well. You can't leave the rural regional pharmacies behind just because they don't have access to the new technology, the new processes, the logistics, as you mentioned. I think that's a very good point and something we need to consider, because if you think about it, as metro cities become more populated, we are naturally just being pushed out further and further, right? Especially affordability of housing and whatnot. People can work from home now. There's no need to be close to a city. So the requirements of heading out there and then the pharmacies having that accessibility and to be able to provide the services, that needs to be a focus. And I think that's very important that we have to evolve with that as well.
And I admit I might be a little bit biased because I have a really strong affinity with, the work in regional area. I think you really treat it as a true healthcare professional. The level of appreciation for people in those communities is something else. So for those of you who haven't practiced in regional areas, go out and do it. Try it out. I think you'll be professionally rewarding, but also, personally as well. Seeing a part of the country that's probably where the true Australia is.
Yeah, I agree because I did that as soon as I finished my internship. Went out to regional, bordering on rural Victoria, and it was amazing. There's a different level of care, but the relationships are the best. Like you will get a cake baked and brought in for you. You'll get Mrs. Smith bringing you her garden produce. You'll, get invited to things, and it's crazy.
It's being part of community. It really is being
you
part
are
of
actually
community.
the essence of community is really in that regional rural areas, and I applaud you for saying that. I think if you get a chance to go out and do that, it just builds up your character and your appreciation of being a pharmacist as well.
I totally agree. But then the challenge is sort of like, when you said, imagine what the pharmacy of the future looks like.
Yeah.
The pharmacy of the future I was thinking of is a wide in somewhere metro.
Yeah.
But how will it translate to somewhere in regional remote? It's nice to have all this technology kind of things, but, your rower machine breaks down in the back of work, it's a long time for a technician to get out there, so it comes down to that equity of access again.
Yeah.
So what does it look like? I think in the regional, rural areas, I think they probably needs to be, whatever model we pursue needs to make sure that the communities that it services have that access to the same level of, pharmacist access. So some places in Sydney, Melbourne, you have pharmacies open 24 hours, 365 days a year. The challenge is how can people in regional remote areas have access to the same service?
Yeah, absolutely. All very, very valid points. As we come to the end of our podcast, Vin, I just wanted to talk to you about, we mentioned about maintaining your mental health, going out and doing what you need to. Can you give me some insight as to what you do? What is it that you practice and keeps you motivated and chugging along on this journey and this incredible journey that you've gone through so far?
A great question, Cav. It's something I was forced to think about, during the pandemic. Like what is the really important things in my life? It turned out that my family was very important. Yet when I looked at the amount of time I allocated to actually thinking about that or doing something about that was actually not very large. So a lot of the change has been around that, so I do a lot of work, self-work, and things like mindfulness. There's heaps of apps out there now, just paying attention to simple things like getting enough sleep, and setting time aside for an activity that you enjoy. There's a great model out there called the PERMA model around this. It kind of talks about, making time for those things that, have you actually done something in the last week that you've really enjoyed so much that you've forgotten time, you've lost track of time. And when I asked myself those questions, I scored 0 on that. And I was like, oh my God, I need to make some changes.
Yeah.
And allocating time to things like, that whether it's going out for a hike or whether it's catching up with a good friend over a coffee, whatever it might be, making that really important so that the rest of your, thing has to fit around that was a revelation to me. Up to that point, work was, number one.
Yes. Yeah. And we get put into that kind of, that, what do you call it? Like a cycle, and we just can't break out of it. Yeah. Yeah.
So practicing mindfulness is, we use Headspace has some great apps, things like, breathing exercises and things, they're a bit, especially for someone like me, with cultural background, I was sort of like, this is a bit, but once I actually made a conscious effort that I was actually going to give this a go, and a good go. And once I started seeing the benefits of it, it encouraged me then to continue with it. But also from my family's point of view is like, just seeing them like, oh, wow, this is a side of myself that they wish that they had more of, but, that they hadn't seen for a long time. And they just kind of assume this is what it is. So, in the early days, pharmacy owner, and I missed out on so many firsts, right? Kids' first swimming lessons and things like those, because I never really thought, oh, well, my business and my work was more important than that. So I never took the time to actually do that. But I encourage younger, pharmacists now, take the time, take that half a day or full day, whatever it is, and be there for those, because you can't go back and experience that again.
Yeah.
So I do spend a lot more focused time, I suppose, on these sort of things. And when I say focused time, I actually put time in my calendar for it, and clear things aside and kind of say, when something pops up, I would ask myself, well, I can shift this or cancel this, or maybe I can shift that. And in the previous version of myself, was like, I'll drop that and fit this in. Now I kind of go back, can we do this time? Or can you give me some other times that we can fit that in? And amazingly, it's possible,
Yes.
And the world hasn't fallen apart. The sky hasn't fallen in. And I think I'm not a happier person. It's hard to say. There's no measure.
Yes.
I'm certainly a more content person, and I hope that the people around me kind of, notice that as well. So it's making that conscious effort. So not just reading stuff and, but actually going out and practicing some of these things.
Yeah.
So
and
part
it's
of
not
that,
too late to
not
start,
too late to
as
start.
you mentioned. Yeah. Yeah.
So I set myself a goal, caught up with an old high school friend of mine, and we said, let's go and trek to Everest Base Camp. So at the time we decided to do it, was a long time away, but now it's the middle of October, it's due, and I'm thinking, I better get
Wow.
cracking. I better get cracking.
That's so cool, though, Vin. What an amazing goal and opportunity to work towards, though. That's so exciting. It's not very far. So
No, it's not very far. Yeah, it's I know.
we'll have to hear all about it.
I'm not losing sleep over it at the moment, but maybe from next month I will.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Awesome. Well, we'll have to hear all about it when you come back. I'm sure all the listeners will want to know, and see what some of the learnings were from then as well, because that'll be a challenge in itself, I can imagine.
I think so. I'm imagining it now.
Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, Vin. It was amazing. I just love to listen to you talk, and you've got so many things, experiences, I guess, that people could
resonate with, and it's just wonderful to see where you yourself and the Infinity Group are heading, and I think it's a very, very exciting future ahead.
Thanks, Kathy. It's my pleasure to join. It was a pleasure to have a chat with you, and look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vin.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast, and don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment if you found this episode of value or have feedback. Podcast episodes are promoted through social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, and major podcast mediums, and each episode can be found on the Pharmacy View webpage with links to the guest contact and business details. If you're a pharmacist or industry support supplier and would like to join us on an episode, send us a message through LinkedIn or complete the inquiry form on the Pharmacy View webpage. I'm your host, Kavita Nadan, Pharmacist Founder from Locumate, and thanks again for joining us today on the Pharmacy View podcast.